Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, which is being hosted by AHDB Beef and Lamb. My name is Chloe McKee, and I'm the Knowledge Transfer Officer for Beef and Lamb within AHDB. I'm delighted to bring you tonight's webinar on characteristics of top-performing beef and sheep farms. Our presenter this evening is Luke Crossman, Senior Analyst within AHDB. Luke has worked for AHDB for over 6 years, previously working on dairy markets before moving to policy and Brexit. The plan of action is that Luke will run through a presentation and then there will be time for questions at the end. You will all stay muted throughout the webinar, but if anyone would like to ask a question, then please type your question into the grey questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. I will then ask Luke these questions at the end of the presentation. So there's over 260 people registered this evening, so hopefully there won't be any technical difficulties, but please bear with us if there are any. So without further delay, I'll hand over to Luke.
Thank you very much, Chloe. Good evening all, and hope you're doing well. This evening we're going to be talking about a report that we've had out calling Preparing for Change, the Characteristics of Top Performing Farms. And it's a bit of a step back away from the usual comparisons between the sort of top and bottom of the financial side of things, and looking more about what are the traits that those top performing farms have. And then we'll tailor it a bit more to some indications for beef and lamb. We will start, however, with some of the financials and looking at a bit of a difference between the top and bottom. So this is for less favourable area grazing livestock. And these, the way that the financials are calculated in the report is matching them. So it's like for like performance in terms of like for like sort of size and herd numbers and bits and pieces like that. So as you can see, there's a large difference in the top figures between the kind of overall farm business income. And the table below is a few key areas where they're the biggest difference between those top and bottom performers. So output, the value of that, and agricultural costs are some of the big ones on there, as well as sort of proportion of cattle and sheep and tenancy. There's more detail in the financial side if you're interested in the full report, and we do have, as we can see now, lowland grazing livestock as well. So the key really for showing the financials is just to set the scene of there are some big differences between the top and bottom, and rather just saying here's some figures, this is where you try and need to get if you're kind of maybe down towards that bottom level or middle level. It's looking just a bit further ahead about, well, what are those guys near the top doing or at the top doing that kind of separates them a little bit more from the rest. So this is the report. You might have seen this at various meetings. It came out in September 18. It's not a be-all and end-all document in the sense that you must do every single thing on this, and it's not us saying that you should be doing that, but it's got loads of tips, advice and things to think about that potentially could help with business performance. We did it in collaboration with Anderson's, and it's been described as having something for everyone. So I would strongly recommend, if you haven't looked at it already, if you come into any events or if you visit the website, then have a look through it. So these are the key 8 factors that the report has defined as what the top performers have, and we'll go through these in a bit more detail in a second. So you can see their minimal overheads, setting goals and budgets, benchmarking, things like that nature, the real key elements that those top performers have. So minimising overhead costs. This is a snippet from the report that says that those that are pushing for top performers and our top performers say that the number one thing that they would look at is the controlling costs. Now, I know that this is probably a message that you've heard to death by now, and it's certainly something that in my sort of just over 6 years, well, over 6 years of being in the industry has always been something that's been banded around. But it's the main thing that anyone has any control over in their farm business. And as a quote down the bottom from Graham Redmond from Anderson says, the output side of things accounts to sort of 10 to 30% of higher profits, whereas lowering the cost and having more control over that is 65 to 90%. So really looking at those costs is key. I mean, it's not looking at it in sense of wholesale changes as well. It's looking at finer details, which we'll come on to in a little bit. Setting goals and budgets. really looking at getting a bit more of a formal plan in place and kind of sticking to it, assessing it, and developing those plans further is something that the top guys tend to have a lot more than those at the bottom. And this is something that we're seeing a lot more with banks and their attitude towards lending. It's not so much a case of what sort of assets you have in play now, or you know, that what the banks can recover against it. It's a lot more down to the individual or the business owners and what they see is the future of their business, how they're going to get there, and how they're going to assess that. There's lots of tools on our website for helping with setting goals and budgets as well. One of the key bits of advice that I would always give is look at the business performance over the past sort of 3 to 5 years on average, in terms of your breakdowns of your costs and your outputs. So it gives you a bit of an average indication of where you have been, because you don't want to look at it purely on a good year or purely on a bad year, because that could distort the picture a lot. So really using what information you can in terms of historical stuff, as well as market outlooks and indication to form those plans to put some figures in place. And then stress testing them as well with, well, here's your main budget. Well, what happens if prices were to fall 5%, or what happens if your inputs were to rise, and vice versa, just to kind of give you a bit of a leeway on if the budget, you know, isn't going to be hit 100%, because they never are. What would be the flexibility on that, and if those situations were to occur, how would you need to adapt to tailor those budgets and try and hit those targets a bit more. Comparing yourselves with others, benchmarking. This is not just a sense of saying, you know, benchmark with others and enjoying things like benchmarking and just look at figures, but this is really analysing the depth of those figures and kind of saying, well, where are you now? Benchmarking with yourself is sort of key to that as well, to kind of go, well, where were you last year, the year before, compared to now? Why has that changed, and where is that issues or potential issues within that have meant results are different, well, not even issues, but where things are positive as well. What have actively been done to make those positive results, and how can you continue pushing with that? Bouncing ideas off others in discussion groups is a great way to really get into farm bench or benchmarking in general if you're not doing it already. Being in that group with like-minded people with like-minded businesses is quite key to helping understand those results and thinking a bit more outside the box as well. Understanding the market. I think a lot of people in the industry might be in a position where they take animals to market and they don't really know where they're going or where the end user is, but trying to gain some of that information and understanding, or if you're a bit more linked in with an abattoir or a processor or a retailer, really look for speaking to them, opening up communication to see what sort of grading that they're actually looking for specifically, and maybe it's something that you might be able to tweak slightly on farm with breeds or different feeding regimes to make sure you can get the most value out of the animal as possible. And that can be done largely through understanding the supply chain, understanding where the animals go and what the kind of need for is further on down the line. Because yes, at the end of the day, the end user is the main customer, if you like. The consumer is the main customer, but realistically, it is through that supply chain as well, with whoever you're selling your stock to. That's your customer. So trying to see if there's anything to do slightly differently to boost your output is very key with that. And it's not just a case of the output side of things, but also on the inputs as well, shopping around, looking at what might happen in the future with feed prices, where they might be moving over the coming months, and fuel prices as well, what might be happening to shift them in one direction or another, to see where you're positioned at the moment and how that might impact on your business. Focusing on detail. This graph comes from the GB cycling team from back in 2012, where it was all about marginal gains, changing little bits and pieces here and there to give an overall beneficial effect. So the blue line is if you started at 100 in terms of returns with no decisions made. If you were to make 100 good decisions in a row, that would give you a 2.5-fold increase on your productivity essentially, and your performance. Whereas vice versa, if you were to do it on a negative side of things, mistakes. Now, not everyone's going to make 100 decisions in a row, good decisions in a row. So it's looking at, as you go along, making little tweaks, seeing what the outcome is, analyzing whether or not it's helped with everything, or whether it's helped with that certain thing you're looking at, but it might have had a knock-on effect elsewhere. And really looking at that detailed side of things to get that marginal gains, because there's no silver bullet to suddenly boosting profits or boosting performance. It's really looking at the integral side of things to see where we can change things and where things can be made a bit better. Having the mindset for change and innovation. Now, this is really key to progressing really in any walk of life, but especially for businesses, because if you're doing the same thing that you've always done, and maybe your parents done as well in the past, it's not going to allow for development and improvement. So having that, taking the blinkers off and having a wider mindset, looking at what other people do in the industry and how you can maybe bring some of those ideas back to you, but even looking at other industries as well, away from beef and sheep, maybe even away from agriculture, to get some learnings elsewhere, see how you can develop those ideas in your own business. And that's really key to a lot of what we'll be talking about with the characteristics in general, because if anyone's kind of looking at this thinking, well, I don't really want to know about much of this stuff, then that's fundamentally kind of where the main barrier is. So having that ability to kind of go, step back a little bit from the business, do a real critical, where am I, where do I want to go, and be willing to speak to other people about what they do, how they do it, and how you can bring that sort of stuff back into your farm. So discussion groups are key to that for a starting point, but there's other things that can be pushed through with that sort of side of things. And innovation is not just about getting all the latest technology in and chucking money at the job, so to speak, but looking at kind of where those little wins might be to maybe make things slightly easier in terms of key parts of the year, or even speed things up with certain different techniques. Continual improvement of people might not be so much of an issue for a lot of people in beef and lamb, but staff is going to potentially be even more important with all the unknowns of what Brexit might throw at us. So being able to retain staff, keep staff happy is going to be key, and that's a lot of that could be down to having a bit more of a formal chat with them to see where they want to go with their own personal development and how the farm business can help them with that. Maybe it's giving them a bit more responsibility, or sending them on training courses, or a work-life balance shift. Could be things that help them with that, or it could just be little things like saying, appraising the work that they're doing and giving them tips of where there could maybe be little improvements on that, or praising them when they're doing things really well. It's not always just about asking someone if they want more money to stay or things like that. So there's other ways around that, and keeping staff, the more that they've developed with the business, the more they're going to know what to do and how the business wants them to do it. So staff retention and management of that could be very key to certain businesses, but also planning as well, to kind of see, well, if someone was to go, it might not be as simple as paying the same amount for someone else in, especially if they developed a certain level of expertise. So trying to see if there's any parameters about what other people might be paying for certain levels, and then thinking about that in a business plan point of view, if there's potential for someone to leave the business. And the final of the 8 factors is specializing, and this isn't a case of if you're doing beef and lamb at the moment, chucking one out and focusing on the other, but it's really looking at the business as a whole, everyone that's associated with the business, to see where the skill set lies, so you can work on the things that you do well and let others do the things that they do well. So that could be that maybe at the moment, as a business owner, you're doing the account side of things, but it's taking you quite a few hours, and it's laborious and you don't really enjoy it. Whereas if you were to pay someone, yeah, you might have an initial cost, but your time is spent elsewhere doing things that you're better at, that you can help improve the business, and they take a lot less time on it, and it actually would save money in the grand scheme of things. So it's really looking at that side of it as well as the technical stuff. If there's certain times of the year, say currently you're doing foot trimming, but actually there's someone on the farm or someone local in the area that does a bit of it around, getting them in to do it for you while you focus on other stuff, again, could be some way of really boosting the business. And it's a lot of this, and well, all of this really is about being very self-critical of where you currently are and where you want to go. And it comes back to that open mindset of really looking into this hard. And it's not just a case of kind of being a bit blasé about it. I think it is really an all-in approach to kind of going, well, this is where we are, this is where we want to go. Are we in the position to get there for the business? And what do we maybe want to look at tweaking and changing to get there? But that would be the initial approach for me, and then it would be this sharing knowledge and ideas to really finalize that aspect, to fully embrace what other people are doing and be willing to bring those ideas and thoughts back on farm of where we are. So that's the kind of main overview of the report for those 8 characteristics. And like I say, in the report that's on screen now, there's more information and sort of tips of where things are. There's lots of stuff on the website for the characteristics as well. But we do have more of a focus report coming out, because in that main report, we do look at sector specific stuff through financials, and we've got a case study in there as well of some good businesses and how they progress, and a bit more of a live example of some of the things that they do. But hopefully in the next sort of few weeks, maybe a month or so, we're getting sector specific reports coming out, and the beef and lamb report, the 3 key areas where it identifies what beef and lamb farmers will probably need to look at more than the other factors, is minimizing overheads, is understanding the market, and is focusing on the details. So if you're looking at any of this now, I would suggest that they're the 3 main areas to maybe look at as a starting point if you're not sure where to start. But if you've got a bit of a plan already and you've seen some of this stuff, then definitely look out for that when it comes out. There'll be a lot more sector specific stuff in there, like I say, and there's also lots of tips for consideration, and it's something that we'll be looking to break down a bit more, but there's 100+ ways of how to be a better farm business, and it's full of tips of not you have to do all of these 100+ things again, but it's little bits and pieces of hopefully thought-provoking ideas that can be looked at, that we can kind of say, here's a few bits and pieces, and on the website and through various meetings that are run, we've got all these tools and expertise that could maybe help with tweak some of those bits and pieces as well, to help with pushing ideas through and to focusing the minds a little bit if there's certain areas that people are wanting to look into. So that's the kind of the main focus of the report, and this is a bit of various other tools that will kind of link in well with that, and how they can help. So this is the better returns resources. On the knowledge library of the AHDB website, there's the 60-minute farm review, and that's looking at identifying the farm's strengths and weaknesses in 60 minutes, comparing your performance with others like farmers in England as well. So again, that's on the knowledge library of the AHDB website. There's a beef and sheep cash flow template under the tools section. The cash flow, which helps you to see when money is coming into and out of your business to identify future peaks and troughs. There's the suckler and sheep records sheet and the flock and herd notebook, which hard copies are available to order. So the record sheets record basic info on your farm's performance, such as calves and lambs born and numbered weans and other performance indicators like that. And there's the notebooks, which whole farm record book to recording lambing data, calving data, growth rates, medicine usage, things like that. And it helps to show you to how to calculate your performance against industry targets as well, also known as key performance indicators. So there's lots of tools and resources that are available that really link in with this the characteristics of top performers. So I'd strongly suggest looking into this a bit more, engaging with your local KE managers, engaging with us. Myself, I'm based at HQ, so there's plenty of people in the office to help guide in certain ways if there's certain things that you're looking in for, or attending discussion groups to bounce ideas off other people as well, to where you might be looking to go with the business in terms of these performance stuff. So that's fundamentally the webinar really on the top performers characteristics. So if there's any questions around some of those, anyone want to go into, if there's any particular bits in a bit more detail, then more than happy to with this. And yeah, just like to say thank you for participating this evening.
Thanks very much, Luke. So you've raised some really good points there. I'm sure people will have quite a few questions and want to delve a bit deeper. So whilst I'm waiting for some questions to come up, I'd like to remind everyone that the presentation has been recorded. I'd just like to highlight that the 60-minute farm review is a brand new tool. So we've just published this today, so you're all the first to hear about it. This is a worksheet, and each section is broken down into manageable chunks. So if you've only got 10 minutes to spare at a time, it's a good one that you can make a start on. And if you'd like to order hard copies of the flock or herd notebooks or any other literature, then please email brp@ahdb.org.uk or phone 024 7647 8834. Thank you. So let's have a look at some questions. So the first question is, can I access the webinar presentation? Yes, so the webinar will be available on the AHDB YouTube channel within the next few days. So Luke, was there any case studies as well that are available for people to look at?
Yes, we've got a case study in the main report, which looks, I think it's more about a beef farm than a beef and sheep, but there are those available. I'm not 100% sure if there's going to be more in the latest report, but it's something that we want to do more of, because we feel that the sort of, you know, me doing a webinar or doing this at a meeting is one thing, but actually hearing live examples and seeing what people are doing, either putting this stuff in practice or just doing it in the first place, is probably the best way to pick up ideas. So it's something that we want to do more of, and hopefully we'll have a few more banded around, but there's definitely one in the main report.
Thanks. And do HDB have access to discussion groups that the audience can join, sheep discussion in particular?
Yeah, I would. There's definitely be discussion groups around that would focus on this at some point. There obviously be other bits and pieces within those meetings that they would want to discuss, but I would suggest speaking to your local KE manager. If you're not sure who that is, on the website there'll be a a section where you can find out who that is, or get in contact with anyone at AHDB. I've just put my details on the screen now, so if you've got any questions relating to that or anything else, then please feel free to send them in, and if I'm not the best person to speak to, I can certainly find out who that is for you. But there is meetings around that you can attend, and hopefully be able to bounce some ideas and get some thoughts that you want to bring back to the farm.
Thank you. And can you also suggest what sort of non-farming business discussion groups? And you mentioned that one earlier. What sort would people attend?
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure what are exactly available, but it's something that we can look at doing, and we have done. I know we've done it before in dairies. Look at other industries and get speakers into meetings, and see how they do things, and learn from a business to business point of view, not just a farmer to farmer point of view. So if you are involved in an AHDB discussion group, or would like that sort of thing, then again, if you contact your local KE manager, or even myself, and then we can look at setting up those sorts of things. So we do get we have done it in the past, and we can definitely do it in the future, because the principles of business are the same for any industry, and sometimes it's quite refreshing to take a step back from farming and look elsewhere to see how those principles can be applied.
Thank you. And could you just recap about the 100 good decisions, please?
Yes, so that came from the GB cycling team in 2012, and it's all about marginal gains. So it's not, that graph shouldn't be looked on as a, you know, anything more than a visual. It's purely there to show you that obviously after 100 good decisions, you'll be in a much better place than 100 bad decisions. So it's really just kind of trying to get the mindset on focusing on the detail, and not looking for that silver bullet that's going to solve everything, but looking at every aspect of the business and where can things be tweaked to improve overall the overall impact of what you will see. So if you do, let's say you do 10 things slightly differently to you're doing now, you'll probably see that 7 or 8 of them have been beneficial, where 3 of them might not have been. So then looking at those 3 and kind of going, well, how can you tweak that a bit more to give a better overall benefit? And it is really looking at the finer details of every aspect of the business. So the feeding regimes, you know, is the what you're feeding at the moment, is that absolutely spot on for the performance you get, or can you tweak it slightly and maybe improve performance at maybe a lower cost, or actually a better return per kilo? Those sorts of things. That's what the focus on the detail is looking at.
Thank you. And the figures at the beginning of the presentation, did they include BPS income, or is it just sheep and beef related income?
I do believe they included BPS.
Thank you. Did you look into diversification strategies as a means to increasing profitability?
It was looked into. It wasn't seen as anything significantly different for beef and lamb. There is, I can't remember the sector off the top of my head, but there is one where diversification output was significantly different. But that's in terms of output value. There isn't the strategy. I don't think was looked at a great deal, purely because it's so varied by where you are situated in the world, and you know what's available to you. But diversification is definitely something, you know, that can be looked at to help boost the farm profits, and the same principles of business will be applied to that as well.
Thanks, Luke. And how important do you think social media is to the success of a farming enterprise?
It depends what you're looking to gain out of it, really. If you're wanting to use the farm in a way to boost agricultural presence and things like Open Farm Sunday, then it can be a great tool to use. If you're selling to like local restaurants or local retailers, then it can be a great way to boost the presence of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and to give consumers that story and that connection. In general, there's obviously a bit of a danger with getting involved with social media, as we've seen from a number of different types of activists and things like that. So there's plenty of positive to it and doing it in the right way, but there is a hint of caution to as well with that. But it all comes down to what is it you're looking to achieve with the business, and what tools are available for you to do that. If you're producing for a processor and you're not looking to push the farm business as such, then it might not be necessarily a tool you want to be using. But for the good of the business, for like I said, targeting local consumers or boosting agriculture in general, the reputation that agriculture in general has, then it can be quite a useful tool.
Thanks, Luke. Let's see what else we've got. So if there's somebody that hasn't previously taken many records beforehand, where would you advise them to start first?
I would advise them to start by looking at the current business position, i.e. what are you buying your inputs for, and breaking it down by all the different things that you'd be buying in, and your outputs as well, and trying to look at comparing that to previous years. If you've got the actual figures, then great. If you need to maybe do a bit of a finger in the air thinking for some of those, then well, it's got to start somewhere. So that's how I would start looking at is looking at it from a bit of a benchmarking point of view, really. And then when you get a position where you've got a few months, and I would do it monthly as well, keep updating it to see where you are. And when you've got a few months worth of data, then you can start looking a bit more about planning ahead and kind of putting some forecasts in to see where you kind of want to go, if there's certain things you want to start changing, and then looking at how you're going to look at changing those as well. But as much detail as possible in that sort of starting point would be crucial for me, because like I say, it's all about looking at the detail of that. And if you've just got here's my inputs, here's my outputs, you're never going to be in that position to really nail into it. So going into each level of where you are, even if certain things are only in quarterly, it still gives you that clear indication.
Thank you. You mentioned one of the characteristics was to specialise. Now, do you mean in terms of the end market, such as boxed meat, or can you expand on that, please?
Well, it's not as such, no. I mean, if that's something that would benefit your business, then that might be where you want to go. But the specializing for the characteristics is more about utilizing skills. So if you're not the best at doing certain aspects of the business, but someone else is, or you might need to hire someone in for that, then that's kind of where the specialized aspect comes in. Really looking at what you're good at, what maybe you're not so good at. If someone is better than you at what you're not so good at that can help, then that's where that's sort of specializing in. So it takes your time away from things that you're not so good at and focuses on the things you are good at to really boost that side of it. And then you get the boost from the other side of someone else who's better than you at picking up bits and pieces. And it's also looking at it from a sort of a staff point of view, or whoever's connected with the business, to do the same thing. So you've got so you can try and identify a nice balance in the team that you're working in, and whoever's connected with the farm, to make sure that everyone and what they're doing is at a decent level that they can really help benefit the business. Also with that is kind of looking at some of those areas and thinking, well, if you say there's 3 of you, 2 of you are really good at a couple of things that the other one isn't, well, how do you kind of boost the training around a little bit as well, to kind of maybe tweak things and try and make sure that everything's covered off by a couple of key specialists is another one.
Thank you. We've had quite a lot of interest in discussion groups, so just in case everybody hasn't seen the message on the chat, we are currently in the process of recruiting the next cohort of strategic farms, and these will be mainly sheep focused. So we are hoping to run some discussion groups around those farms. And we currently have 10 strategic farms that are primarily suckler focused at the moment as well. So I think that's it for the questions, Luke. Thank you very much.
Cheers, thank you.
So thank you everybody at home for listening. I'd like to remind you that the presentation has been recorded, so it will be available on the YouTube channels along with other previous webinars. And please do check out the website for the new tools that we've got out. So thanks again, Luke, and thank you again for everybody at home, and have a good evening.